Welcome to another Secret Influence TV interview. Today I'm very excited to have R.C. Hans back in the studio, one of my first interviewees for my channel. So R.C. Hans is a world traveler and writer, and he'll be sharing some of his experiences as a writer, how he approaches it, but also some of the recent books and talks he's been giving as part of his journey and his passion for writing. So I'd like to welcome to the stage. Welcome to the channel, Raymond. Good to have you here again.
Thank you very much, Nick.
So to start, what would you like to say what's your what inspires you to write? What do you love so much about writing?
Well, I grew up in a very unconventional family. My parents owned a large bar and saloon and dance hall, and all my friends were criminals and drug addicts. So I have a vast reservoir of fun characters to talk about. My first book, The Adventures of the Smith Family, is an 18th century English folk tale. It's kind of a Robin Hood meets Downton Abbey. And I think of all my books, it's the most important book because it talks about creating a life from nothing.
Would you say with writing, people say that it's always based on every writer bases their stories on something they've either experienced themselves or they've seen or heard. Would you say that you use your own experiences within your stories? Are they inspired by your own experiences in life, your short stories?
Oh, absolutely. Plus, somehow I feel comfortable in that time of history. I think people had to be a little more resilient back in those days. We're rather spoiled now. And I think if any of us were put in those circumstances of the 18th century, we'd all fare rather poorly. So it's a time where every day is an adventure. And like myself, being self-employed, before I retired 11 years ago, my daily life was always an adventure because you never knew what you're going to come across.
I love that. I love that approach to life. I think to see life as an adventure. That's certainly something I think I've got a 7-year-old son, and I think seeing children's excitement at life. He definitely sees life as an adventure. I think it's a great way to look at life. With so history is something you're clearly interested in. What do you find? Have you always been interested in history? Is it something that's, and is there a particular area? Is there a particular history that fascinates you the most?
No, it's all history. My wife and I have traveled to 83 countries, including North Korea. And we want to learn about these different cultures and the history of these different countries. I try to read at least an hour every day. I just finished a book on the Cultural Revolution in China, which we seem to be going through right now in the United States. We're going through a cultural revolution, and it's quite interesting to watch it and see what unfolds next. I just happened to see a program on Tamerlan from Uzbekistan, and they were talking about the possibility of the curse on his grave. And when he was dug up 2 days later, the Germans invaded Russia. And when the Russians put him back in his original gravesite, the war ended 2 days later. So maybe he had a little input on that outcome. I'm not sure. But there's lots of these stories out there that are worth learning about.
I mean, firstly, 83 countries. That's quite impressive. That's incredible. And I can understand the one of the things that myself, when I've done traveling, is that mythology. Almost every country has its own history and almost mythology, of stories from the past. And sometimes what's history and what's fact and what's fiction. I think that's it's fascinating. We almost the fiction part of history is as fascinating as the fact.
Absolutely.
83 countries. Is there a country you haven't been to yet that's on your list to visit, or have you?
Well, we've tried to go to Egypt twice, and each time there's been a little political issue come up. We were going to Iran this year, and obviously it's not a good choice at the moment. my wife has been to Jordan, and we're going to go to Jordan and Egypt this year. All things hopefully remain as calm as they are at the moment.
Sure. So still a few places, still a few places left. Yeah. With storytelling, what do you think? What do you think makes a good story? What
Well, in the simplest form, you need to have a beginning, a middle, and an ending. And I think my books are exploring characters involved in action. They're not action based; they're character based. And I grew up in a situation where I had to walk out amongst hundreds of people to clean up messes of one sort or another in our saloon. And we won't have to go into those lurid details. But I was comfortable as a young child being around adults more so than other children, because I worked from the time I was 6 years old. I had a shoe shine box, and I shot pool in our bar. And so I was around adult male inebriated nincompoops, and had to hold my own with them. And so getting up on stage to tell a story is not a problem. And I have hundreds of stories that I experienced at the ready to call forward.
And what to talk about sort of storytelling, and since the beginning of history, since the cavemen, we know storytelling be used to pass on wisdom and obviously to entertain. And even for businesses, they say one of the best ways to, as a business, to get your brand message across and grow your fan base for business is by storytelling. So and whether it's through film or books, okay, what do you why do you think storytelling is such a powerful thing, as a way to communicate?
Well, first of all, I think it's because we all have a story to tell. And truth be known, we want to tell it if we're given the opportunity. Every person's life is unique, and we all experience things, good and bad, that we hopefully learn lessons from. And I think it brings us together as a tribe, so to speak, if we hear another person tell stories about his failings and shortcomings and surviving dangerous or interesting circumstances.
I agree with you there. I think I think it's such a powerful thing. I mean, I love books and I love films, and I encourage my own son to encourage his imagination. I think imagination is such a powerful thing, and for him to read stories, to tell stories, I think having that that way of sharing your excitement for and ideas is a fascinating thing. So what I want to ask you about now is some of your recent sort of projects, starting with your book Sunrise Sunset. I know it's one of your more recent books. Would you like to tell me what is I think I understand a book of short stories. What's his latest book about, and perhaps is there a theme throughout it?
Well, it's a book of 10 short stories. It's been on Amazon for a while, but now it's on Audible. There are some nonsensical short stories in there, and there's a couple of longer stories. One that's very poignant about an African American and a Caucasian farmer that are neighbors, and they have to work together during hard times in the 30s in the Deep South. And they're both going through some difficult times. And the whole country, of course, at that time in the early 30s was in the grips of the Depression, and no one had two nickels to rub together. And it's a story of them fighting against those difficult economic times and the difficult times of racism and inequality. And there's always been, the human condition always revolves around inequality and difficult circumstances. There's always, for some reason beyond my understanding, there are people out there who want to do harm to others. There is evil in the world, and for whatever reason, God has a sense of humor, apparently, as sick as it may be. And that particular story is called Thomas Brown, and it's just their relationship and how they help each other, and hopefully it's a parable of how we should treat each other. I think Most of my writing is just for fun, but The Adventures of the Smith Family was about creating a life from nothing and working hard and expecting, to succeed on your own merits, which sometimes seems to get lost these days. And I think that my other stories are entertaining, perhaps, I hope. It's hard to get feedback now with COVID, with people not having the ability to go and do book readings and so forth. But I hand out my books to a lot of my friends, and I see them running away from me sometimes when they see me coming. But I want to get feedback from my books, and I'm already very comfortable. I had a very successful career as a contractor for 38 years. I was self-employed. I don't do this for the money. I do this to do my little part, perhaps to give someone a way of looking at the world. And maybe if they read this story or one of my stories, they can see themselves in it or see a person who survives adversity. And if that helps one person, then I'm content.
It's interesting to hear you say that, because people talk a lot about the why. The why you do something is the most important thing. And if that's not strong enough, if you haven't got strong enough why, you won't achieve what you want to achieve. And I think it sounds the same in your book, writing, that it's your why you do it is because you enjoy doing it, you have a passion for it. And I think you can't have a stronger reason to do something than genuinely being enjoying it and passionate. So it's good just to hear. What have you? So you said before you've had a career in contracting, and is it okay? So you were in the plastering.
Yes.
Very different. Do we always, when did your writing? Do you always write, or was it something that came out in your later years? When you sort of.
I wrote my first book when I was about 12 years old.
Okay.
And of course, no one saw it, thank goodness. And it was about Little League baseball players. I've written poetry all through high school and short stories. And interestingly, I had to retire because I had an epileptic seizure. And I started taking a medication that's renowned for stimulating your imagination. And it really had a profound effect on me. And it started my writing again 11 years ago. So I have many, many books. I have 7 or 8 books on Amazon. And I wanted to create the product before I went out to promote these books. It seems foolish to try and promote yourself when you don't have any products. And so I spent the last 10 years writing, and I spent the last year or so promoting. And I'm working on a book right now on World War II. I have a book that I've written called Grandpa Ernie's Secrets, which is a spy novel that unfolds in Italy for the most part. And it's a interesting family with some secrets, of course, and some world events that they're dealing with. And my wife lived in Italy for a year. We've been there a couple of times on vacation. And so I got a chance to do some research on Italy and learn about the landmarks and put those into my stories and have these characters running around in Italy. And I never know what's going to happen in my stories. I don't use an outline. I just write cold. And eventually I have a story in front of me, and then I have to make a list of the characters to keep track of their relationships and who's who. But the story comes to me as I write. It's spontaneous. And I know some authors do that, and some authors do very highly developed outlines. And perhaps the success or failure of my endeavor will indicate whether or not I'm good at doing this.
You've always answered my next question there, because I was going to ask you how you approach your writing, because I'm sure different writers approach differently, but you have to be quite disciplined, especially if you're writing or organized to an extent. Because if you're writing a novel, there's a lot of content, a lot of potentially a lot of words, and like you say, you've got to research it. So just a bit more on that. How do you find you have to be, with a book writing, you have to be, organized and disciplined, or do you just find that actually?
Well, I'm an artist. I have an artist mentality. My wife is the logical person in our relationship. She's very disciplined. She was one of the first female navigators in the U.S. Navy. I've always painted. I'm not a great painter, but I enjoy it. I've written poetry, so I actually write 2 or 3 novels at the same time. I was a hyperactive child. And I'll write a book for 6 months and set it aside and let things stew a little bit, and I'll start another story. It's interesting when I write, I have characters come to me on their own volition, it seems. And so I have no idea where the book is going. And so I write the book and then I go back over it and shape it into a more cogent or coherent form, I suppose. And my first book, I spent 5 years writing it, and I re-edited it and rewrote it many times over and sent it to my editor, and he came back with some ideas, and that's kind of how the process works. It's not perhaps as efficient as one might be, but it's always interesting.
Would you say, the more you've written, the more you find the process gets easier in an extent?
Absolutely. I have 2 books right now that are completed that aren't up on Amazon yet. I'm having a little difficulty finding people to help me. I'm not a technical person in that sense. I was on a cruise to Iceland a few years ago, and I watched a very interesting program on people who were craftsmen. And I came across a story about the Fabergé eggs. And so that made me, for some reason, I came at it backwards, and it created a whole storyline of a haunted mansion in pre-statehood California. And so I have this book called The House on the Cliff that was built by a financier before the railroads came across and met in Utah, United States. And he had to sail around the Cape a couple of times, bringing tradesmen and supplies to California. And he built his home. And that all came from the fact that I watched a 10-minute blurb on a cruise ship going to Iceland in a storm about the Fabergé eggs. And they play a little part in the story, but there's all kinds of crazy characters in this story. And I have a story called Mrs. V, which is on Amazon now as a short story, but I've rewritten it as a novel. And it's about a woman exacting revenge on some men who killed her husband, and her relationship with the police department. And as always in life, everything isn't apparent at first glance, and what you see at first glance isn't necessarily so. My book that I'm writing right now, it's a prequel to Grandpa Ernie's Secret. I have 12 chapters done at the moment, and my character is in boot camp, getting ready to go overseas into Europe to add his body to the carnage in World War II. And in preparation for that, I've read 3 or 4 books on the CIA. And the more you read about the CIA, the more you understand that what you see around you isn't necessarily so.
Sure.
They have people who are in media who work for them. They have books and magazines that are created by the CIA. And so an average layperson like myself would never think about that until you do a little bit of a dive into it and do some research. And then you find, oh, lo and behold, these things happen because of X, not because of Y. And I mean, every country has an obligation to protect itself, and the CIA is part of that apparatus, but it isn't always necessarily doing the best thing for our country. Or in looking back in history, it's easy to see there were a few failures, to say the least.
I think it's a great point. So, and for me, I think we all have our perspective on life based on our knowledge and our experiences. But I think reading or is one example of it can open our eyes, whether it's finding out facts, or even just or if it's fiction. I think it does. It's good to. I think it's good to question things, and books. Reading a book. It can have that power to make us think, oh wow, yeah, actually maybe things aren't quite as we see, or maybe there's a different view to things. I think I love reading a book where it actually makes me ask questions, and I think, oh, actually, yeah, that's good.
We can't have a viewpoint to see all these things. We're only human.
It's true.
And to have other input really makes a difference. I just finished American Spy by E. Howard Hunt, who was involved in the Watergate burglaries, among other things. And he's gone now, but he's very clear on what his activities were. And it's interesting. Yeah. And of course, you had Ian Fleming, who worked in your apparatus in your country and wrote some great novels. And perhaps people don't know that he was involved in that. Was it MI6 or MI5? And he didn't write those stories out of his mind. He wrote those out of his experiences and embellished them a little bit with gadgets and told stories in order to get the stories out, but not give away too many secrets.
I think you've hit nail on the head there. I think, you know, it's the more truth there is in a, you know, if you're writing a book of fiction, but, you know, if it's you're basing on some truth, it's more believable. If ultimately, you know, it's a story you're telling, but it's you basing on truth, people are more likely to believe it and connect with it. One thing I was going to ask about is, I know you do some storytelling events, and you do one called the Monday Night Storytelling event. And I just wanted to ask, you know, what makes you do that? You know, obviously that's more of a direct way of connecting to an audience. But yeah, tell me a bit more about those events and why you do those.
Well, I'm a very social animal. All of my customers were my friends. I had people who I worked for 40 years. I worked 10 years for my father before I went into business and took over the business myself. So I had customers I worked for from the time I was 18 until I was 62. So I had long-term relationships with these people. And when I retired, I went back to playing tennis, and I went to the rec department. And I met a bunch of people, and I play tennis every day, and I have 14 or 18 people that come to my house. I have 3 tennis courts in my condo complex, and we gather all different ages, all different political perspectives, identifying pronouns, whatever you want to say. And I get along with most everybody, and I like to visit with people and tell my stories. And again, I had a very unorthodox childhood. I had a monkey at one time as a pet. I had a donkey. I had a dingo.
Wow.
Not many people can say they had a donkey, a monkey, and a dingo.
That was a nice story there.
And those were all interesting events. And again, I grew up with these crazy people. So I have these crazy stories in my head swirling around, and I put them on my website at cowboyproductions52.com. The first chapter of all my novels are there. My travel blog is there, and a lot of stories. There's one called "The Shot in the Dark," where I was standing behind a woman whose son-in-law shot her, and she went across the room and went into a hand-in-hand combat with him, and pretty much worked him over because he was drunk, of course. I saw many things. By the time I was 10 or 12 years old, I'd seen things that most adults have never seen. People shooting heroin and any number of things, which are very educational. And I don't drink coffee. I took that lifestyle as a university course in how not to behave, rather than emulating it. And my father had his issues with alcohol, and I saw we had a lot of family turmoil due to that. And so if I can use these, you know what they say about comedy comes from sadness and tragedy. I've seen a fair share that most of us have, and it gives me a comedic energy and comedic information to put out there for to the world, so they can benefit from that.
So would you say in some ways, you know, being able to turn what could be seen as not I don't know, negative experiences, but, you know, challenging experiences, which at the time could be quite hard, but, you know, turning those into positive, you know, because they perhaps inspire some stories you write, or, you know, or making changes in your life, you know. So it's having that.
Absolutely. As a parent, you know, we all know we want to protect our children. As a person who had parents who didn't have much interest in that, I understand how valuable it is to be set free at a very young age. I may be fortunate that I survived, but I saw some and learned some very wonderful lessons. And I wouldn't change my childhood if I could. I wouldn't change it one bit.
So obviously, yeah, I mean, clearly, you know, your childhood growing up has had a big impact on the direction you've taken, and certainly your storytelling with the Monday night storytelling. Do you sort of, is it sort of would you sort of just get an understanding of it? Is it short, you know, is it excerpts from short stories, or is it more just storytelling as in entertaining with
well,
things that happen in your life?
they have to be, first of all, they have to be true.
Right.
and they have to be 6 minutes long.
Okay, that's interesting.
So it puts you into a little bit of a confining structure. It's a writing group that comes together. Mariana Williams, who is a writer, and she's the wife of Paul Williams, the American songwriter and actor. He's there also telling stories occasionally. So she herds us like a group of cats, and we have different people coming in periodically on these Monday nights to tell stories. And it's just, some of them are just fascinating. Some are recent occurrences. Some took place over COVID. There's some interesting COVID stories there where people were restricted in their abilities to go out into the world and work and had to create a livelihood. And as always, I think the best, every business is the same. You're selling X. Now, the process is get to be known, let everybody know that X is good, and sell it at a fair price and treat your customers kindly. Telling stories is the same thing. And hopefully people will enjoy them and learn a lesson. Part of it for me was a challenge to get on stage. And I was surprised at how not nervous I was because of those days as a child with a mop and a pail mopping up messes from people who drank too much beer. And again, I worked in the real world. I worked in over probably 20,000 houses and apartments with strangers every day. So I had to go out into the world every day. I didn't have an office to go to where Bob was my guy next in the next cubicle. I was going out to see someone I'd never seen before. And so that builds your internal fortitude to be able to have a conversation with a stranger. I used to tell people, the damage in your home is only just an excuse for me to get into your home so I can talk to you and learn something. And that's what I did for 38 years. I got to meet strangers, listen to them if I could shut up, and learn something from them, because I can learn something from everybody.
And you said, yeah, clearly a very sort of a sociable person. It almost sounds like you're interested in almost the psychology of what makes people tick in that way.
Absolutely.
With the storytelling, would you say that there's an aspect of being surrounded by people who are, if you surround yourself with people who tell stories or interested in storytelling, I think it's that approach to, if you want to be good at something, surround yourself by people who are also interested in that. Is there something about that, being surrounded by to help?
And I was very fortunate to not grow up in a family where my dad had a job. So, my father was self-employed my whole life. And so that was my normal view of the world, was that you were self-employed. So I never had I have a degree in criminology, an AA degree in criminology. I thought I might go to law school and become an attorney, but I didn't want to wear a tie that bad. And I went to school at night. So I worked with my father as a kid from the time I was 8-10 years old. And when we were 6 years old, we got our bar and restaurant. But things were tough in that time, and we started a plastering business. So I also worked with my dad in that business. And so I always knew that I'm 71 years old. If I had to go out and go back to work today, I could. I know that. I would put an ad in the paper. I had ads in 3 magazines and 2 newspapers for 38 years. If I, for some unforeseen reason, had to go out and go to work again, I know exactly what I would do. I would put the ads back in the newspapers, and in a week I'd have work to do. So as a self-employed person, I have that skill, and that skill has helped me in this writing pursuit, because I understand promotion. I'm not a technical person, but I understand that you have to get your voice out there and your face out there, as old and nasty as it is, and get your point across, and try and make friends and influence people and make them want to come and read your stories. Sadly, it seems to me, and I may be wrong, it seems because of the technological world we live in, people don't have time and perhaps don't read as often as they used to. My biggest problem through COVID is being able to get out there and get feedback on my books. I've sent some around the world over as emails. I give them out to friends and enemies. My friends lie to me and tell me they're great. Their feedback isn't really very important, because they're my friends. What are they going to say? So I would love to get feedback from people who read them. I have had a couple of scathing reviews on Amazon. Fair enough. My story, The Adventures of the Smith Family, is a 5-star, I believe, on Amazon, and I think it's worth a read. Grandpa Ernie's Secrets is a fun romp through Italy. You learn a little bit and have some fun. So what more can you ask for?
So on that note, about getting your readers' feedback, perhaps I'll throw out a bit of a challenge here, to anyone who watches this, to check out. I always, whenever I interview people, I always do say, check out this person's profile and what they do, and think of authors. Look at their Amazon page, look at their book. I encourage people to do that. If people wanted to give you feedback or follow you, what's the best way of doing that?
There's a spot on my website where they can send me an email. I'm on Instagram at RC Hand. My on Facebook at RC Hand. And of course, my website at cowboyproductions52.com. And I have the first chapter of each of my novels on my website. So you can go there and read those, and it may interest you, it may not. I love women. My mother was a strong character in my life, and a lot of my books have strong female characters. And I think that the truth be known, some people disagree with me, but truth be known, the women run the world. And anybody who disagrees with that, you can send me an email because I'll talk to you about it.
Sure. So just reminding you, so cowboyproduction52.com is Raymond's website. The first chapter, every book is written as there, as I'm sure everyone watching this will agree. But storytelling, is such a powerful thing. Whether it's storytelling through reading books, whether it's through storytelling in films or the theatre, whether it's storytelling as a way a business engages with its audience, with its customers and clients, to tell a brand story and get across why people should buy their product or service. Storytelling is a great way of passing information, for entertaining. We've done it at the beginning of time, and I think I as a writer myself for my business and personal, I love storytelling, and I think it's so powerful. And I regularly interview authors on Secret Influence TV, and I genuinely urge you to check out Raymond's website. Give him feedback. That's how we all value feedback. It's one of the most powerful things that whatever we do in life. Without feedback, we can't improve. And
That's right.
Positive or negative, if it's authentic, genuine feedback, is really valuable. So I would say check out the RC Hands page on Facebook. He's on Instagram, and look at his website. Check out his books and give him feedback. It's something I think we all need to do more and more in life. Giving feedback, if it's done constructively, is a really positive thing to give and to receive.
I can take it.
There we go. You can take it. And just another question, perhaps to sort of draw the interview towards a close. A lot of people want or think about writing a book or writing a short story. Everybody heard the question a lot, but what would you say someone who's struggling to get started, whether it's practically or mindset thing? What would you say?
Well, failure is not an option. You have to practice, and you have a great story to tell. Every person has a great story to tell. It may come from a small kernel or small event that you can expound upon or expand upon. And I encourage everyone to do that. 1% of the authors sell 99% of the book, sadly. So I may never make any money in this pursuit, but I've had a great time, and I've met some very interesting characters floating around in my mind, and put them down on paper for other people to enjoy and perhaps hate or dislike. I couldn't ask for a better outcome. If I make a couple of bucks, that's gravy. That's just even better.
I think my two things I take away from what you said there, Raymond, is that when you write or do anything creative, not everyone's going to love your finished product. If you write, but some people will love it, some people may not. But if you enjoy what you do and you have a passion for it, I think that's the key thing, isn't it? It's
absolutely.
If it does, yeah. So that's, sorry to cut you off. so we're getting towards the end of our interview, and what's next? I mean, I know you're still working some books and projects, but would you like to do a bit more of the speaking side, or I know you said you're currently working a few books. You're obviously going to bring, but is there anything else? Any more exciting plans?
I think my main pursuit for the next year or so, I actually have sent out I've sent out so many emails on LinkedIn that I'm sure there's people watching this who have received one, and sorry if it bothered you. I've had a few people complain about me sending them an email, but most people have been very nice. If you don't get my information, how are you going to find out about me? And I'm not shy, obviously. Yeah, my main pursuit now is to promote my works. I have a very difficult book to write now with World War II. Requires a lot of research. I'm going to put some my fictional characters in real events in the war. I have people that they're going to meet, and the main crux of this story is to create the understanding of why my novel, Grandpa Ernie's Secrets. Grandpa Ernie is a very clever spy, and he doesn't use violence. And there's a reason for that. And you'll learn the reason for that in this novel I'm writing now, because his father was an assassin and in the CIA. And so that's what I'm working on now. And I have to tell you, I've been a little bit lazy. It requires more work because I have to interweave the fiction with fact. And that's going to be a little bit of a challenge.
Well, on that note, I will definitely be giving it an active eye out on your upcoming books, Raymond, and I'm planning to work my way through everything you've written. I'm a passionate writer and reader myself, and obviously that's a key part of what I do in life. And just to say, I really believe that in the idea of your community and supporting others. As I have it on Facebook. I have a large copywriting community where I share my tips for people who are interested in copywriting. And I think, so I think we, that's the way to have success in some ways, is to support others, follow others, and share our expertise. And if we all grow, we all can be successful. And so, yes, do check out Raymond's channels. Do follow him, and of course do subscribe to Confess TV. So on this channel, I interview people who I think have some expertise to share, which can help others have success in business or the personal life, or have a powerful story to tell. And I do interview a lot of writers because I think writing is such a powerful thing. It's writing can inspire you, it can excite you, it can motivate you, it can entertain you, it can inform you. It can do all these things, and what better effect of something to have in your life. So thank you, Raymond, for your time, and it was great to have you back. And I will share your website, social media details with this video, and I'm sure I'll hopefully get you back again in the future, and we can have another.
Oh, I'd love that. I'd love that. Thank you very much. I just want people to not be afraid. Do what you think you might want to do, and focus on that, and really go forward. Don't be afraid of failure. It's just a learning experience.